In the 1990s, disaster films were making an absolute killing at box office. By the year 1998, the three highest grossing films of all time were Titanic, Jurassic Park, and Independence Day. Armageddon rode that trail of success and grossed a total of $553 million, making it the highest grossing film of 1998. And it was a film about oil drillers going into outer space to destroy an asteroid that's meant to collide with Earth. Yeah.
Ho 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 ho! Delightfully devilish, Seymour.
Yes, everybody, welcome back to Delightfully Devilish, the show where we discuss films that all at once meet the criteria of being the good, the bad, and the ugly. I'm your host, Jukebox Harry, and today we are looking at a film which perfectly sums up the career of Michael Bay. After the worldwide commercial and critical success of 1996's The Rock, Michael Bay had become a certified name for directing Hollywood blockbusters. And after that, he went on to make Armageddon. Now, when I first watched Armageddon as a child, I have to say I wasn't familiar enough with Michael Bay's style of directing to fully embrace it. I was mostly put off by its excessive length, which is a big trait of Michael Bay movies. The second time I watched the movie, the fast pace of the film's editing really caught me off guard. Also, I was watching it on an iPhone at an airport in New York City while waiting for the sun to rise, so I really wasn't watching it on a big enough screen to embrace the spectacle. On the third viewing, however, I watched it on the big screen, and I knew to embrace the melodramatic script and ridiculous plot along with the sheer sense of spirit in the movie. So let's explode onto the scene. Literally, the first thing you see in Armageddon is a long take of an asteroid hitting the Earth, which the narrator informs us is meant to be a digital recreation of the 6-mile-wide asteroid which killed the dinosaurs and brought on the Ice Age. So the film literally opens on an explosion with state-of-the-art visual effects, two of the most defining aspects of any Michael Bay film. Then the actual movie starts out in space, and once the asteroid field starts hitting the shuttle, you really notice one of the most iconic things about this movie, which is just how fast the film is cut together. If you try to find any takes in this film where the shots actually linger long enough for you to catch your breath, then you're going to be searching for a very long time. The entirety of Armageddon is cut together in such a furiously quick way that one would typically cut together an action scene to maintain intensity. Armageddon tries using the same technique during scenes where characters are just talking in an effort to keep audiences on their toes. The problem with this is it doesn't allow audiences a chance to catch their breath. Even when the story isn't actually going anywhere, Armageddon uses its quick cut style to give audiences the illusion that the story is progressing. Todd McCarthy put it perfectly when he said the editing style in this film resembles, quote, a machine gun stuck in the firing position for 2.5 hours. That is actually the smartest thing I've heard anyone say about this movie. The cuts in this film are shot at you like an automatic weapon. The average amount of time that each shot actually goes for in this movie is 1.5 seconds. Funnily enough, there is one other movie I've ever gotten this feeling from, Star Wars: The Rise of Skywalker, one of the single worst science fiction movies ever made. I say that as a die-hard Star Wars fan. That movie was a disgrace. Rise of Skywalker was constantly moving between a ridiculous number of different planets and plot points to disguise the fact that it never actually explained anything about them, or gave audiences any reason to believe or care about any of it. And by phenomenal coincidence, one of the screenwriters on Armageddon was J.J. Abrams, who actually wrote, produced, and directed The Rise of Skywalker. I did not actually recognize that Abrams was involved with Armageddon until my third viewing, but it actually makes a lot of sense. But objectively speaking, Armageddon is a film which is way superior to Star Wars: The Rise of Skywalker in every way. A lot of people want to pretend that The Rise of Skywalker is such a great film because we really want to believe that. Truth is, it's the worst thing to happen to the Star Wars universe since the Star Wars Holiday Special. And that includes The Last Jedi. With Armageddon, there are no stakes in this story. It's simply a dumb fun science fiction movie, so the cutting style is way more forgivable. Miniature asteroids start hitting Earth, firstly impacting an African-American man who apparently explodes. I know Michael Bay loves his explosions, but I really remember learning in Black History Month that African-Americans, they don't explode. But as a Michael Bay film, every single point that a meteor hits explodes.
You know why? Because this is New York City. Anything could have happened.
To the film's credit, all the explosions are pretty exhilarating to look at if you're in for disaster and action fare. And if you're not, then I don't know why you're watching a Michael Bay film. Even the World Trade Center gets impacted by it, so maybe George Bush had something to do with these asteroids.
My God. So
then naturally the film cuts to an oil rig where Bruce Willis is hitting golf balls at Greenpeace. What a big tonal shift. His character, Harry Stamper, bursts into the room of AJ Frost, played by Ben Affleck, where he finds his daughter, Grace.
Grace,
Hi, Harry.
I have asked you repeatedly to call me Dad.
Well, looks like she's busy calling someone else daddy now. And his natural American instincts take over.
I started blasting. Bang! Bang! No, I don't see so good, so I missed. Then they ran away. I ran after them. Bang! Tried to shoot him in the back.
He even fires his shotgun blindly at the sky. This is also a recurring trait in Michael Bay films. This happened in Pearl Harbor and it was my favorite moment. Turns out the oil rig is relevant to the story because they're part of a plan to stop the asteroid.
Are you suggesting that we blow this thing up from the inside?
That's exactly what I'm saying.
How?
We drill. We bring in the world's best deep core driller.
The government goes to visit the oil rig.
And I swear to God, she never told me her age.
It's all right, relax. It's about me.
Then we're immediately swung back to NASA along with Harry Stamper where they explain the situation to him.
It's unbelievable.
Well, actually, this is as real as it gets.
Actually, any scientist can tell you that this film is riddled with scientific inaccuracies, but they're not the kind that a lot of the general public should really care about. Harry Stamper has come along to prep the NASA crew on how to operate a drill that he designed himself.
We've had them training for 8 months solid now.
Oh, gee whiz.
Unfortunately, Harry Stamper isn't as optimistic about the situation and instead suggests providing his own team.
You want to send these boys into space? Fine. Sure, they'll make good astronauts. They don't know jack about drilling.
There is 18 days before the asteroid is due to hit, and Harry Stamper's idea is to bring in his own crew and train them during that time to become astronauts.
We gotta come up with something realistic here. We got 18 days.
Now, obviously, it takes a certain kind of skill to operate a special type of drill, but the base of it is like peeing when you have a penis. Point and shoot.
Point and shoot.
But even though Harry Stamper genuinely thinks that they have the necessary smarts to do so, he'd rather have his own team of oil drillers trained for less than 3 weeks to go into space and destroy the asteroid. If you think this idea is ridiculous, you are not alone. Even Ben Affleck voiced his own concerns over the plot during the filming of this movie.
I asked Michael why it was easier to train oil drillers to become astronauts than it was to train astronauts to become oil drillers, and he told me to shut the fuck up. So that was the end of that talk.
Basically, you want to ignore this plot point because blue-collar oil drillers seem a lot more relatable than astronauts, particularly to the audience of a Michael Bay film. And the cast of actors that Michael Bay assembles for his team includes our favorite comic relief, the Oscar nominee from The Green Mile, and this guy riding a horse. Wow.
The fate of the planet is in the hands of a bunch of retards I wouldn't trust with a potato gun.
Fuck, you're an angry person, eh?
And the team all have some very lavish requests if they're going to save the planet.
Hey, you guys wouldn't be able to tell us who actually killed Kennedy, would you? Bear would like to stay at the White Horse.
White House.
Armageddon had the foresight to see an African American in the White House and the destruction of the World Trade Center. Armageddon predicted Obama and 9/11. Michael Bay has to be a fucking genius.
None of them want to pay taxes again. Ever.
The characters are prepared and trained over a series of montages, which mostly serve as a front for jokes which are all pretty ridiculous. But I'd much rather see Michael Clarke Duncan tear off his clothes and dance like a stripper than see Taylor Leone have dinner with her parents or Elijah Wood have an underage marriage. Armageddon goes to show that dumb relatable characters are far more amusing to watch than smart boring ones. And that was something that Deep Impact didn't pick up on. They all fail their tests, but NASA doesn't care. And we get the obligatory slow motion walking shot. The training continues underwater and Sweet Emotion by Aerosmith starts playing over the course of this montage. I can't say I'm particularly surprised at this song being used because Michael Bay got Aerosmith to record a new song for Armageddon, and I fucking love Aerosmith and this song, but he went on to reuse this song in the soundtrack for Transformers Dark of the Moon. There are other songs out there, Michael. But then again, Michael Bay does have a track record for reusing the same thing he's used before in another film, namely using the same shot from one movie in another movie. We get some aviation shots, just because, and some more walking shots, all while getting the occasional image of the asteroid to remind us that we're on the clock.
Now we only have one shot.
One opportunity.
Part of the asteroid even hits Shanghai and wipes it all out, just so that we get another nice special effects shot amid all the training. When I watched the film this time, my heart actually dropped when I heard this song playing. This is the piano rendition of the Aerosmith song, I Don't Want to Miss a Thing, which was made for this film. I used to share this song with my ex-girlfriend. I definitely low-key started crying when this was playing. AJ proposes to Grace as a part of the obligatory love story.
But we all helped raise her, so in part we all feel like a bunch of daddies here.
It's true.
For such a cheesy line that actually sounds pretty badass coming from Michael Clarke Duncan. I'd call that man daddy any day. Rest in peace.
You know what I was thinking?
Yeah, there it is again. I had to stay strong.
I really don't think that the animal cracker qualifies as a cracker.
Why?
Well, because it's sweet, which to me suggests cookie.
The only time I've ever seen less romantic dialogue in a scene which is part of a love story was in Star Wars Attack of the Clones.
I don't like sand. It's coarse and rough and irritating, and it gets everywhere.
Baby, do you think it's possible that anyone else in the world is doing this very same thing at this very same moment?
Oh, yeah.
Nope!
Hey.
Who's he? That man's a salesman.
He's the kid's father. This is Michael Bay's idea of stopping the film for a second to try to put some depth into the story. Emphasis on the word try.
What are you doing out here, honey?
That's a good question. It turns out they're just trying to build more drama.
Can you please bring my fiancé home with you?
And when the mission finally starts going underway, we see all the cool slow motion shots that define a Michael Bay film start showing their faces. But before we actually go into space, everyone starts breaking into a musical number.
I'll be back again.
Leaving.
On a jet plane. Don't know when I'll be back again.
This is who you found to save the planet.
And then we get the President's Speech, another recurring theme in disaster films and Michael Bay films. God damn it, just when you finally think we're about to go into space, Michael Bay has to stop and make sure that his film really is as generic as possible. And there's that beautiful orange shot.
That man's not a salesman. That's your daddy.
Oh, fuck you. Just fuck you. Like in Pearl Harbor, when we had to wait 80 minutes before the titular attack, Armageddon has you waiting a total of 70 minutes before the characters finally go into space. Armageddon doesn't tease audiences as much about when the action is finally going to start as Pearl Harbor did, but Michael Bay still gives his audience blue balls in making us wait for it while still giving us constant interruptions. When we're 5 minutes shy of being halfway through this 2.5 hour film, finally some relevant and exciting things start to actually happen. And of course we have Michael Bay's state-of-the-art visual effects to show it all off. Now remember, these special effects came from 1998, 22 years ago. They've aged incredibly well.
Oh my God. This is space! We're just in the beginning part of space. We haven't even gotten to outer space yet.
Owen Wilson, I love you, but shut up. After some nice shots of space and the planet Earth, which the film depicts as round, one of the few actual scientific accuracies in the film, the shuttle finds the Russian space station.
This is a Russian space station, can you hear me?
I didn't believe for a second that this guy was Russian, but on further investigation it turns out this is Peter Stormare, the guy who actually fed Steve Buscemi into the wood chipper in Fargo. So I guess Armageddon's a nice reunion for the two of them. Still, if you can't believe a North European actor like Peter Stormare as a Russian, then something is going wrong. The shuttle docks so that it can acquire some more jet fuel, and in no time things start going wrong again. A fire breaks out and all hell breaks loose. Because remember, the film doesn't want to allow you a second to stop and take a breath. There's a whole lot of shots of things going wrong, but none of it is particularly interesting. And just as the characters take off, the station goes the way of everything else in a Michael Bay film and explodes. Then we end up in the tails of the asteroid field, and the detail in both the asteroid's design and the trails it leaves in space are just magnificent. With the characters flying through the asteroid field, the film suddenly starts to feel like a live-action adaptation of the video game Asteroids. And that makes perfect sense, because if this film did have any source material, it would make perfect sense that it was an 8-bit Atari game. One of the ships ends up crashing, resulting in a melodramatic crash scene that plays out largely over the course of an excess of slow-motion shots where people get injured and things explode in a series of ways. To this film's credit, I have seen a lot of movies with crash landings, but I've never seen any movie where a space shuttle crash lands on an asteroid. That's something that this film can claim as original. Grace thinks that her boyfriend has died in a crash.
Maybe you shouldn't be here.
I don't have anywhere else to go.
Well, none of you do. You're all on planet Earth together. If they don't save the planet, then you're all fucked. Turns out AJ actually does survive this, so that makes for another recurring theme in Michael Bay films. Remember, that was the predictable and ridiculous plot twist in Pearl Harbor. Unfortunately, one of the characters who does die is the one played by Owen Wilson, and I hate that. Owen Wilson is known largely for playing likable nice guys in comedy films. No one wants to see him die on an asteroid. Any of the other actors, sure, just not Owen Wilson.
God, I hate knowing everything.
That line was definitely written by Michael Bay. The surviving crew starts drilling, only to find that since they've landed in the wrong place, they're now drilling into a layer of iron.
This is a goddamn Greek tragedy.
Anyway, as you can see, things are pretty bloody dreadful here.
Meanwhile, AJ, Lev, and Bear disrespect the American flag by shooting a bunch of holes in it so that they can drive their mobile driller out to the location of the others. This starts another adventure, but back at the landing site, chaos has begun to ensue.
You and your men are the biggest mistake in the history of NASA.
Yeah, NASA thinking that it's a good idea to send a crew of oil drillers into space after 12 days of very loose training, that definitely is a mistake. NASA thinks that the mission is lost, so they go with a backup plan.
The president's advisors feel that the drilling isn't working, and we've lost radio contact, maybe for good. We've only got a few minutes left of guaranteed ability to remote detonate that nuke.
And we get one of the most dramatic key sequences in any movie ever. With a bomb armed, everyone starts acting up.
Don't. What are you doing with a gun in space?
Michael Bay, people. They decide to try one more time and disarm the bomb, removing the safety net.
Houston, you have a problem. See, I promised my little girl that I'd be coming home.
Nothing in this world can get between Bruce Willis and his daughter. He's like Liam Neeson and Taken that way. AJ's crew gets stuck at the crater, but he comes up with a great idea.
Have you ever heard of Evel Knievel?
No, I never saw Star Wars.
That was terrible. Fuck you, J.J. Abrams. They decide to make a jump, and it's just beautiful to look at. But of course, things start going wrong.
What's wrong?
The thrust is not working.
I hate this machine!
Mr. European climbs out onto the back of the vehicle and tries to fix the vehicle as it crashes through the stones and hits a lot of flying debris. And I don't care if you don't believe what's happening here, this scene is just so beautiful to look at. Eventually they land safely and somehow they all survive.
Thank you, Jesus. Thank you, Lord. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
It's worth noting that Steve Buscemi took on the role of Rockan in the film because it was pitched to him as a very intelligent geologist and he wanted to stop playing low-life scumbags in movies.
Yeehaw! Rock cowboy!
Unsurprisingly, it turned out like every other Steve Buscemi role. He's literally opening fire on an asteroid. You can't tell me that this isn't a video game film. We get another part of the asteroid striking Earth, laying a deep crater in the planet, and AJ goes to meet up with Harry again.
I got just 5 words for you. Damn glad to see you, boy! It's 6 words.
They start drilling, and in a matter of seconds, they reach the appropriate depth to plant the explosive. Wow, that felt kind of really quick. And then things randomly start exploding on the asteroid. The crew runs into a rock storm, which knocks everyone about.
We lost Gruber.
Don't be surprised if you can't remember who Gruber is. He's one of the least memorable characters in the film. On top of all this, the bomb's remote detonator gets too damaged to function, meaning that someone needs to stay on the asteroid and sacrifice themselves to detonate it manually.
You think we all stay and die? Or you guys draw straws?
I say we all stay and die.
Suicide is badass.
Everyone draws straws. Unfortunately, it's AJ who ends up with a short straw and gets the responsibility of dying to save the world. But while on the surface, Harry seals AJ inside and takes charge of making the sacrifice.
My God!
Always thought of you as a son.
Okay, that line I don't believe for a second. You were literally chasing this guy with a shotgun earlier. If you think of this guy as a son, then you must be Abraham, the guy from the Bible that tried to kill his son Isaac.
Go take care of my little girl now.
Harry!
You take care of yourself.
I love you, Harry! I love you!
This scene is such a moment of ridiculous melodrama. I definitely cried in this scene all 3 times when I watched this movie. The sheer heroism of Harry's sacrifice, the heavy emotion in the air, it gets to me every time I watch this movie. If I'm crying watching a Michael Bay film, that means he's doing something correctly. Harry contacts Grace to say an emotional goodbye to his daughter.
I'm so scared. I know it, baby. But there won't be anything to be scared of soon.
Everyone else makes it off the asteroid and Harry stays behind to make the sacrifice.
Thank you, Harry.
Just as the asteroid begins to pass the threshold where blowing it up would fail to prevent it from impacting Earth, Harry overcomes his struggles and manages to pull the trigger at the last moment.
Press it!
This turns into perhaps the most definitive Michael Bay moment ever, the biggest explosion he's ever put in a movie, and one which saves the entire planet Earth. All the visuals are nothing short of spectacular. The asteroid splits into 2 halves and they both miss the planet Earth by 400 miles.
Another happy landing.
Since everything else went wrong in this film, I think a chaotic landing back on Earth would actually add to the dramatic power of this film. I mean, it worked in Gravity. No, instead we just get another slow motion walking shot. I actually laugh whenever I see these now. They're so typical of a Michael Bay film.
Requesting permission to shake the hand of the daughter of the bravest man I've ever met.
Remember that Liv Tyler's actual father is Steven Tyler, the lead singer of Aerosmith? He's gotta love the fact that this line is in the movie. The film ends with Grace and AJ getting married, and this song playing, and me crying. Yes, that makes 4 times I've cried watching this movie. Bear is even seen to have survived to the end of the film, so to Armageddon's credit, it avoids the cliche of having the black guy dying first. Is Armageddon a good film? Yes. And I don't mean that ironically, Armageddon objectively is a good film. Upon its original release, Armageddon got nominated for 6 Golden Raspberry Awards, with Bruce Willis taking home the award for Worst Actor, which I think is complete bullshit. Roger Ebert named Armageddon the worst film of 1998, but at the same time his co-host Gene Siskel actually gave the film a thumbs up. It also got nominated for 4 Academy Awards. It has a critical rating of 38% on Rotten Tomatoes, but an audience score of 73%. There is a lot of divide with this film, but it's not hard to see why. Regardless of how you look at it, Armageddon is definitely a dumb film. It is so melodramatic that it's either ridiculous or hilarious, but in neither situation will it actually require your brain to do any thought processing. Armageddon is one of many expensive, ridiculous, and overblown science fiction movies from the 1990s. It's up there with Mars Attacks, Starship Troopers, Stargate, Independence Day, and The Fifth Element, although with a budget of $140 million, Armageddon was more expensive than the rest of them. And yet when it comes to the tone of the movie, Armageddon is way closer to Apollo 13. It's trying to be a more grounded story of tragedy in space, except that since Apollo 13 is based on a true story, it's interested in being scientifically accurate, whereas with Armageddon, NASA actually shows this movie to management trainees and has them point out how many scientific errors there are in this film. A total of 168 have been found so far. So I guess even if you don't like this movie, it does make a contribution to society. God bless you, Michael Bay. Armageddon has all the issues of a standard Michael Bay film. It's aimed at being as generic as possible, meaning that it has a predictably patriotic story with little concern for character development, believable drama, or originality. The pacing is also annoying at times because it starts really fast and then slows down to the point where it feels like it's taking forever to go nowhere. It only finds a consistent pace in its 3rd act, when the characters are finally actually on the asteroid. Also, the film has a 2.5-hour running time. That has always been the bane of Michael Bay films for me. They're always too damn long. And the romantic subplot is one of the most conventional features of the movie, even though it was actually added only after Titanic proved to be such a hit. And that explains why Michael Bay's later film Pearl Harbor shares a lot of similarities with Armageddon while also being so narratively similar to Titanic. Both films are just trying to cash in on the success of what was the highest grossing film of all time by that point in history. Armageddon is generic because it is a relentless people pleaser. It provides female audiences with a pretty boy Ben Affleck love story, while giving male audiences plenty of explosions and audiences of all genders plenty of amazing visuals to be stunned by. It doesn't care about anything but being popular, so there's no ambition in the story other than to entertain. And the carefree direction that Michael Bay brings to the film may offend audiences who demand a higher standard of intellect with their movies, but for audiences who can just sit back and have a good time, they're more likely to enjoy Armageddon. Honestly, Armageddon resembles the thrill you get from a theme park ride. It straps you in, tries to keep you exhilarated from start to finish, but beyond the film's attempts to give you thrills, it doesn't really do anything to appeal to your more cognitive functioning. There's not a lot of tension until we get into space, but the sheer ridiculousness of the situations is always pretty laughable if you stop taking it seriously. Armageddon succeeds simply because it is a grand spectacle. The training sequences in Armageddon were shot in restricted parts of the NASA Space Agency because the administration believed that the film would end up becoming influential as a piece of recruitment material. They saw what was happening with the Navy after Top Gun and hoped Armageddon would do the same thing. I tried researching this, I couldn't actually find whether that worked or not. Once we get into outer space, that's when Armageddon really earns its Academy Award nominations for Best Sound, Sound Editing, and Visual Effects. The outer space section of the film still stands up today as an unforgettable visual experience, even if the lighting can be a little dark at times. Say what you want about Michael Bay, the man is a complete visionary. And the 4th Academy Award nomination on this film went to the Aerosmith track I Don't Want to Miss a Thing for Best Original Song. That was the first time Aerosmith ever actually had a #1 hit. It helped solidify the band's comeback as one of the greatest comebacks in rock and roll history. And the orchestral tracks by Trevor Rabin are also really good. They're intense, but they're also uplifting. And even without interesting characters, the cast of Armageddon give a really good effort. Starting with Bruce Willis, who definitely did not deserve his Golden Raspberry Award for Worst Actor. He won this award for 2 other films in the same year as well. The Siege, where he was perfectly okay, and Mercury Rising, where admittedly he might not have been at his best. In Armageddon, however, he was perfectly fine. The film demands an actor who can really ham it up to grasp the relentless melodrama in the story, and Bruce Willis does that convincingly thanks to his natural charm and status as an action hero. Furthermore, Bruce Willis accepted his role in this film because in return, Disney paid for the production cost of a failed project called Broadway Brawler that he worked on. And Armageddon was part of a 3-film contract for Bruce Willis. The other 2 movies ended up being The Sixth Sense and Unbreakable, 2 films which feature some of Bruce Willis's finest work to date. Considering that nowadays most Bruce Willis films are direct-to-DVD action thrillers that often get 0% on Rotten Tomatoes or don't get enough critics seeing them to actually warrant a score, it's nice to see a film where Bruce Willis actually gives a shit, even if he didn't like working with Michael Bay. Ben Affleck delivers the appeal of a charming pretty boy, Steve Buscemi plays his comedic archetype with gusto, and Michael Clarke Duncan is always a welcome presence. Liv Tyler doesn't have many notes to her performance, but she serves as less of a character and more of a plot device because that's normally what women do in Michael Bay films. As a final note, I did an episode on the film Deep Impact where I compared it to Armageddon in a much greater detail, but let me try to reiterate my points in a few sentences. Deep Impact focuses more on the human response to an impending apocalyptic threat and ends up being 90% about melodramatic human drama amongst unconnected characters, each of whose story is either boring, lifeless, or a ridiculous childish fantasy that I'm less willing to believe than a story about oil drillers being trained as astronauts in a period of days. There was little spectacle to the film, and it was so boring that I had to watch it twice to actually even remember anything from the film. You go into a disaster film because you know it's going to be a conventional blockbuster experience, and that's what you want from it. Deep Impact isn't a fun movie because it tries too hard to be smart without actually ever succeeding. Armageddon embraces being dumb and being entertaining, and as a result, it succeeds in doing both. And for a $140 million film, which was produced and released entirely in 11 months, it did a damn good job. Armageddon gets 6 space jumps out of 10. It's pretentious, it's long, and its editing style will leave you breathless. But with Michael Bay's bombastic direction, Armageddon is a flagrant spectacle of incredible visuals and shameless American patriotism, which you might be willing to embrace if you can let go of just how ridiculous the movie is. And that does it for today's episode of Delightfully Devilish, you guys. If there are any movies you want to see me discuss on the show, please leave them in the comment section below. If you want to see more episodes of the show, please hit that subscribe button. Otherwise, until next time, I have been your host, Jukebox Harry. Peace. And I don't want to miss a thing.